Olá a todos, boa noite, bem-vindos ao Exo, hoje com a presença de Whitley Strieber. Ele que foi e ainda é um nome incontornável em termos de ufologia e de contactismo. O seu relato em livro inspirou milhões de pessoas por todo o mundo a relatarem as suas experiências. Comigo tenho o Rodrigo para acompanhar-me nesta conversa e também o nosso coordenador, o Francisco Mourão. Boa noite a ambos.
Boa noite.
Viva.
Vai ser uma grande noite.
Assim esperamos. Um agradecimento também à nossa equipa de bastidores. Temos o César Soares, o Pedro Moutinho, o Ricardo Mesquita, o Nuno Frois, o Alexandre Duarte, a Jane Veloso. Portanto, um agradecimento a todos eles. E, claro, também um agradecimento especial aos nossos supporters aqui do canal, às pessoas que nos vão ajudando com pequenas contribuições mensais. E, portanto, temos aqui três membros que fazem parte e não consegui colocar o nome deles aqui na tela, mas agradeço. Muito bem, nós vamos começar esta conversa com o Whitley Strieber. Participe, subscreva, faça um donativo através de superchat, se entender, ou então deixe o seu gosto. Esta viagem vai começar agora. Whitley Strieber, I'm so grateful to be able to speak with you after spend part of my teenagehood reading articles about your story with non-human intelligences. So thank you so much to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's very exciting to talk to the people of Portugal, I believe, for the first time.
Indeed. So I had the pleasure and the privilege to meet Whitley in Barcelona. We had a very wonderful time together, and it was, like Philippe said, a dream come true, in the sense that knowing about during the past decades about your story, having read your books as well, it is an honor to have you with us and present your experiences to the Portuguese public. So we would like obviously to maybe for the people that may not know you, who is Whitley Strieber?
Okay, well, there must be many people in Portugal who don't know me because my books haven't been published there for a while. I am the author of many books dating back into the 1970s. The book that we'll be discussing today, I think, is going to be Communion, a book I published in 1988 about an extraordinary close encounter of the third kind that I had in upstate New York in 1985. And it took me quite a while to realize that it had actually happened, that it wasn't some kind of a dream. But now, over all these years later, the U.S. government is beginning to admit that things like this do happen. They're just starting to. They haven't really said that yet, but they will say it sooner or later, I think. So that's who I am, and that's what I'll talk about today.
Whitley, we are approaching Christmas. In your book, Communion, you said, and I quote, "I did not believe in UFOs at all before this happened, and I would laugh in the face of anybody who claimed contact." So let's go back in time, still in Christmas, but 39 years ago, and get to know the incident would change all your perspective about UFOs and contact.
Okay. It was a very quiet Christmas, lovely Christmas. It was myself, my son, and my wife. The three of us were at a cabin about 90 miles north of New York City, about 30 miles south of another town called Woodstock. And there wasn't much else around. There were a few other cabins in the area, a small town. But we weren't, it was very, very quiet. We had a lovely Christmas. My little boy was 7 years old. And it was a beautiful Christmas. Now we had a lovely Christmas dinner. And then the next day we went cross-country skiing, and it was a beautiful day. The evening fell, and there was snow coming, a light snow, and we went walking in the snow up the road. And it was one of those snowfalls that happen fairly rarely, where the flakes are quite large, and you could see the wonderful crystalline form of the flakes as they landed on the back of your gloves. And it was just a lovely evening. We went to bed about 9 in the evening. Our little boy went to bed somewhat before we did. And in the middle of the night, I heard noises and felt movement. And I opened my eyes because, it certainly wasn't something I expected. And to my horror, I saw a face, staring at me with big black eyes, like a gigantic insect. And it peered at me. And I was, I thought I was dreaming, and I closed my eyes and tried to make my bed come back up around me. I wanted, to be back in the real world. And it didn't happen. The room I was in was a very confined little room, round, and I thought it was the interior of a tent. There were other people there, little beings, little dark blue fellows. And the next thing I knew, someone had turned on a recorded voice that said in this very sort of mechanical way, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" And kept repeating that. And the answer was absolutely nothing. Nothing you could do to get. I didn't even know I was screaming. I was that panicked. Then they showed me a little needle that they were going to push into the side of my head, and I cried out, "Children, a beautiful mind." And they did it anyway. Then they inserted a device into my rectum, which damaged me, and it was like a rape. It was a terrible experience. And then the next thing I knew, after these violent experiences had taken place, I was waking up the next morning in my bed. And I knew something had gone wrong during the night. I felt like something had happened. But what? I asked my wife, Anne, and she said, no, it was a quiet night. And I thought, well, what in the world? Why don't I think it was a quiet night? And then I began to feel the pain of the injuries. I was very distraught for the next few days. I couldn't sleep. I was terribly uncomfortable physically. and pain. And so I made an appointment with the doctor, and the week after that, I went to the doctor's office. And by the time I had gone there, I had remembered pretty much, I had these memories of these beings and going up into the air and sitting in a circle in the woods with them, and then going up in the air, and then being in this little room, and it all sounded completely crazy to me. How could I was worried that I was losing my mind. And I told the doctor of the experience, and he said, you're telling me you were taken over a flying saucer by little men. And I said, well, that's what it sounds like. And he said, well, since we both know that can't happen, why don't we do some tests? We'll do a test on your brain, a magnetic resonance imaging scan. We do some psychological testing, do a test on your temporal lobe to see whether or not you have a type of epilepsy called temporal lobe epilepsy that causes people to have very vivid hallucinations. We'll do all of these things, and we'll see where we are. And where we were after the tests were all in was, I was a man who had a lot of stress in his life, but I wasn't psychologically off at all. I was a sane, normal person. There was nothing wrong with my brain, and I didn't have any kind of epilepsy that would cause me to have hallucinations. And then I told him something I was very hard to say, that I had these physical injuries. He'd already seen the one on my cheek and on my back side of my head, and he said, it looks like a spider bite and it's not inflamed, so we'll just leave it alone. At the time he said that, I didn't tell him what I remembered. But then at this point, I was in so much pain I could hardly sit down. And I told him where my injuries were. And he examined me and he said, Whitley, you do have a lesion, a rectal lesion. There has been some damage there. And I don't know what else to say about the mark on your head, except obviously it could be a needle mark. But my guess is it's a spider bite. Then we decided, well, it must have been criminal activity, because the crazy hallucinations, the fact that I wasn't ill in any way, there was nothing about me personally that would generate those hallucinations. And the injury meant that I had been attacked by someone. And I'd written some fairly controversial books at that point. One of them being a book called War Day, which had offended the Reagan administration. And so I thought to myself, maybe someone attacked me, someone who didn't like my books, and they tried to drive me crazy, and in order to prevent me from writing anything more. And the problem was that there were I called the New York State Criminal Investigation Division, and they couldn't do anything because there were no residues of any drugs in my blood. There was no evidence, and the remembrance I had of these big black eyes, and obviously, if it was a human being, it had been a mask. And by this time, I had also read a rather strange book called Science and the UFOs, and it had a section in it that was about people who had been abducted by aliens, and sounded like what had happened to me. And I thought, oh boy, that's not a road I'm going to go down. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But
Whitley, just to recap something I didn't get. Did you see a ship, a flying saucer at this point?
No.
No. Okay.
Not from the outside, only from the inside.
Only from the inside. Okay.
Yes. So, and as I say, it's just a little round room, and my impression of it was that it was. Excuse me, I have very heavy allergies at the present time. There's a lot of dust in the air here.
I can suggest us to see a short clip of this that Whitley has been talking to us, so our viewers can have a better idea of what's going on with Whitley's life. So this is the first visit on Whitley's bedroom. Yes.
Go ahead.
In this documentary for travel, you have mentioned some sort of mask or helmet, as you did here in this conversation. However, I think that is on your book, you make reference under hypnosis to some sort of a shield. Could that be due to the fact you had a shotgun and somehow these visitors knew you had a shotgun near you?
I didn't have a shotgun at the time. Oh no, yes, I did. I'm sorry. That might be the case. I had, but the clip you showed was a memory from October, the previous October, which when the event happened in December, that memory was completely buried. I had none of that. That came out unexpectedly during hypnosis. But to get back to to what had happened, I decided that I read in this book that these people were hypnotized and they would remember these things. And I decided to try hypnosis. And so Ann and I went to see this man, Bud Hopkins, on the theory that he would know someone who could do this. And he was an artist and a very sweet man, but he wanted to hypnotize me himself. And I said, no, absolutely not. You're not a professional artist. And he then said, well, I'll find a hypnotist. And he did. He found probably the best one in the United States. He was a psychiatrist called Dr. Donald Klein. And Dr. Klein was the head of the New York State Department of Psychiatry and one of the world's leading forensic hypnotists. That is a hypnotist who can help people remember things that they have forgotten due to trauma, such as being knocked down by an automobile. And then he would help them remember the license number, and they would be able to find the car. And he had done that over 70 times successfully in his career prior to my meeting him. So I felt comfortable with him. And Dr. Klein and I were laughing up our sleeves at Bud Hopkins, who was sure it would be an alien thing. He hadn't told me much about the alien stuff, but I was hoping that instead of these masks and so forth, I would see something that would enable me to identify the people who had done this, so I could go back to the Criminal Investigation Division and give them some evidence, catch whoever it was. And the result was that I saw vividly detailed images, not only of what had happened in December of 1985, but of things that had happened the previous October. And I was appalled that this could happen. But I finally faced the fact that it had been what it appeared to be. And to this day, I don't know what they are. I wouldn't say they are aliens. I wouldn't even say they're connected with the flying saucers that we see now in the news so often.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. If you can find a relation between the two.
I can't.
Yeah.
Well, there's one possibility on a personal basis, and that is that the that the I had a friend who was a state policeman, retired, and he lived in the same area, just up the road from us. And about a year after the experience, after Communion had been published, he came over to the house and he said to me, "Whitley, I have something I want to tell you, and I want to apologize to you." I thought, well, what in the world could he need to apologize to me for? So he said, on the night after Christmas, which is the night it happened, my wife and I, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, had been riding home from a party, and we saw what we thought was the Goodyear blimp in a field, and it was a snow-covered field near both of our houses. And he said, I stopped because I thought that no blimp should be down in a field like this. Something's wrong. And being a state policeman, he felt an obligation to try to help. And he got out of his car, jumped across the fence, there's a low fence there, and started walking toward it. He heard screaming from inside it. And he began to run toward it through the snow. And whereupon lights came on all over it, and it began to make a growling noise and come toward him. Whereupon his wife back in the car began to scream. And he was frightened because he knew it was no ordinary blimp, whatever it was. And he turned around and went back to his car and drove away. And he said, Whitley, I should have tried to help you now that I know what happened and that it was you in there. I should have tried to help you. And I said, no, you shouldn't have. You did the right thing. No telling what would have happened to you if you'd stayed in that field.
Yeah.
So that's it, though.
Yeah.
I don't have any other indications of a relationship. There's no video of a person being taken into UFO. None. There's just nothing.
Did that person notice that it was you? It was your voice? Did he feel it was your voice?
He heard
just
screaming.
Heard screaming. Yeah.
But who else could
but
it be?
It connected,
It was pretty obviously me. I mean, maybe they abducted more than one person that night. I don't know. But it certainly, if it wasn't me, it was certainly someone in the same situation.
Yeah.
But, there's anecdotal evidence like that. There's stories that connect the two. But there's no hard evidence that connects the two. And there's no hard evidence that says these beings are even aliens.
Yeah.
They may not be. They may be something entirely different. There's one or two authors, very skilled researchers, who believe they're human beings from the future.
Yeah. We have Dr. Gary Nolan now talking about the possibility that they may be from our planet, being with us for ages, for thousands of years. So they may be inherent to planet Earth. We have a lot of hypotheses right now. Hypotheses.
Well, it could be that they are from Earth. They come up. One of the things that happened after we published Communion, we got thousands upon thousands of letters, and Anne thought to herself and said to me, we could get groups of people up to the cabin and see if the visitors are interested in showing up.
Yeah.
And that happened. From time to time, we'd get groups up to the cabin, and they would show up. But the interesting thing is, they had an odor, and the odor was not something strange and alien at all. It was the smell of the forest floor, as if they'd come up from below. And there are stories all over the world of beings who live underground or live in so-called fairy mounds and so forth. So maybe they are from here.
So what led you to think on writing a book about your experiences? Because you started writing books about science fiction, right?
Yeah.
So how did you find a way to um, put out your experiences, knowing also that probably most people would not uh, believe in them, although you had an extremely surprising um, response from the public, because you had thousands and thousands of letters from readers, right?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, that's right. Well, when Anne and I decided together to do the book, it was not because we didn't think it was a very big deal, but it was such an unusual experience. We felt like I should write it down at least. And it slowly turned into a book. And with just me telling the story. And she said, this is really a fascinating story. We should send it to the publisher and see if they want it to publish it. And they did want to publish it. But I had no idea that the public would be so interested. The reason the public was interested was this face. This is the face. This is the original painting of the face on the cover of Communion. And those eyes riveted apparently millions of people around the world, who realized that they had seen this face and that it wasn't, they thought it was a dream or hallucination, but it wasn't. Thousands and thousands of them sent us letters, and we 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 collected all the letters. They're now in a university archive in Texas at Rice University. And this was all completely unexpected. We had no idea that it would be such a big thing. None. The publisher knew, of course, because they have their finger on the pulse of the market, but they didn't tell me anything about that. So it was shocking. And it also caused us tremendous amount of trouble because the media just devoured me. It was horrible. I spent years going on shows and being laughed at and scorned, and it was just dreadful.
All those people that wrote to you, were they having similar experiences, or were they just relating to the face in the cover of the book?
The thing that's fascinating is that they weren't having similar experiences for the most part. They were all seeing the same beings, but having very different experiences with them. And we collected letters, a book called The Communion Letters, that is a sample of how different all of these experiences are. And then my most recent book, Them, analyzes 11 of the experiences, showing the 11 different types of experience, and they're just very complex. I mean, human beings, we don't have the same experience with each other every day either.
But
We have
even you had several different, extremely different experiences throughout your life, right?
Oh, I have had now, yeah. Uh, I have had many experiences with them because I made a decision when, after we had calmed down, I almost tried to get my wife to divorce me at first because I thought I was going insane. I didn't want her to be saddled with a madman in an asylum. She needed to get out there and, you know, continue to build her family and have a good life. But then when I realized that this was all real, I loved her dearly, and I was afraid if I told her, she'd divorce me. So finally I did tell her, and she said to me, "Oh, thank God! I thought you were going crazy. Now I don't have to worry about getting a divorce." And I thought, what? This was a powerful woman, my wife,
Yeah.
and she took over from that moment on, and she made this all come into focus. But as I say, we did not know the extent of the public involvement. And subsequently, in the years past, about 6 months later, I said to her, "Anne, if they're out there, and they obviously are, I should make some attempt to try to reconnect with them, because as frightening as this was, my God, it's contact with another intelligent species. It's completely different from us. And I'm a writer. I shouldn't ignore that." And so I did. I started going out in the woods in the middle of the night. The first night I said, "Well, let's go out in the woods." She said, "Us?" I said, "Yeah, we'll do it together." She said, "Oh, no, we won't. I've got a little 7-year-old boy in the bedroom, and I've got to take care of him. You can go out by yourself and see what happens." And so off I went. And the first night, I could only get to the edge of the lawn. I couldn't get into the woods. It was too frightening. There was no evidence of their presence. But over the years of going that and doing that again and again, they did come back from time to time, and we established a relationship of sorts. It's not easy, and it's not fun, but it is very fascinating. Very.
Whitley. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
But you have physical evidence of something, right? You have an implant.
Yeah. In this year, right here,
Yeah.
there is an object which in I believe it was in 1992. First, I'll tell you how it happened. In 1989, we were in the cabin, and I woke up, or rather, Anne was asleep. It was about 11 o'clock at night. I was awake. We were, at this point, we have a shotgun under the bed, a pistol in the drawer beside my bed, and a bank of switches that, if you turn them on, floods the whole area around the house with light. And so I suddenly hear, it's a May night, warm, the windows are open, the front window overlooks the driveway, and I suddenly hear in the driveway the crunch of gravel. It was a gravel driveway, but there were no lights. Now we had also a gate, a big gate. So there was obviously an intrusion taking place, obviously. And I immediately started to go for the shotgun. I mean, excuse me, the first move was to turn on the lights. But as I was moving to turn on the lights, I heard a voice in the backyard say, male voice say, "Condition red." And then I saw two women, a woman and a man, standing near the foot of the bed. You notice there's no aliens in this. I never saw, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
So,
yeah. It's interesting.
So I started to go for the shotgun, and they stopped. They made it impossible for me to move or to see. I couldn't move. I couldn't see. And someone began pushing my head down into the pillow like this. And the woman was speaking very softly and gently. And then there was a flash of light. a great crashing in the woods. And I jumped up, grabbed the pistol, and went running through the house because I could see that the alarm system was still armed. Therefore, how had they gotten in? And I ran through the whole house and couldn't find anything open, and ended up sitting on the edge of the bed thinking, I'm going to have to learn something about lucid dreams, because that must have been a dream, and it was extremely strange and very real. I had a fitful night, you can be sure. I didn't sleep very well. Then when I went out to get in the car in the morning, the system was still on. I was planning to turn it off on the keypad in the garage, which was attached to the house. I went into the garage, and the garage door was wide open, even though the system was still on. So I thought, maybe, good God, somebody came in the house after all, and had very strange capabilities here. So I called the alarm man who ran the alarm system. He came over to the house, and he said, there's a very strong magnetic field here. That's what's keeping the switch from tripping on the garage door. That's why it can stay open even though, and not trip the switch. I said, well, where's that coming from? He said, I have no idea. And all he could do was replace the switches. But obviously, someone who could control magnetic fields had come in there, because we can't create a free-floating magnetic field. So that was obviously something really strange. Then the next couple of days, I felt this thing in my ear. And boy, I wanted it out. I said, Anne, they're watching me at all times. And she said, why do you care? I said, well, I don't want to have something like that in my ear. She said, nobody cares whether or not you're going to go down to the drugstore and get a newspaper. So just leave it alone. Let's see what it's about. So I left it alone for a couple of years, and it would turn on every once in a while and turn bright red. My ear would turn bright red. There'd be this sound in my ear, but it didn't seem to do anything.
Yeah. So you don't attribute it to alien beings or to other beings. You attribute it to
I can attribute it to who I saw. I saw two people.
Yeah.
Human
Okay,
beings.
yeah.
They appeared to be human anyway, but they were in
Yeah.
possession of technologies that are far beyond what we have. They could control magnetic fields. They could control me. And they could put this in here with no scar. There was no opening, no scar, no blood, anything.
Whitley, have you ever tried to remove the implant?
Sure. In fact, on my website, on unknowncountry.com, the video of the removal attempt is available. And what happens is,
it moves. Yeah.
Well, the first thing that happens is the doctor sees it, and it's a white disc. He touches it with his scalpel, and it moved from here down into my earlobe. And my wife saw it too. She was right there. She said they agreed it was a white disc, a little white disc. And it remained in my earlobe for 2 days. When the doctor saw that had happened, he couldn't take it out of my ear. He said, I'll have to take the whole ear off. And 2 days later, it went back from here, back right up here. And it was, I went out to a place in San Antonio, Texas called Southwest Research Institute, which is a big science institute that had been founded by a friend of my family. And so I had an in there, and the director of material science and I were sitting in his office talking about the implant, and it turned on, and my ear turned bright red. And I said, Bill, it's turning on right now. And he said, let's go into the signals lab. Because they had a very sophisticated signals acquisition lab. We went running in there. He turned all the instruments on. And they said that they had found something, but they couldn't tell me anything about it because the lab is classified. So that was frustrating. 20 years later, two men showed up at a book signing I was doing in the same city, San Antonio, and said, "We just want to tell you, the signal is still under study. It's the strangest signal that we have ever acquired in our work as signals intelligence officers. But we can't tell you any more about it." And they turned around and left. So there you have it. That's the implant.
Be them human, be them aliens. We can't get.
I can only tell you
what
I can only tell you what I saw.
Yeah.
With a story as wild as my story, the last thing you want to do is speculate. I don't.
Yeah.
Whitley, that implant still interferes with the electronic equipment near you, or
it's actually very useful. I use it in research because I can make it give me information, and it's very helpful. I wouldn't trade it for anything. My wife was right to keep it in there.
have you ever felt some sort of telepathic message, some kind of thought that you knew it wasn't yours, through that device, some sort of thought implanted on your head?
It doesn't really work that way. I've had that happen a few times, yes, but it doesn't work that way. The implant, excuse me, the implant opens up a little slit in my field of vision. You can see letters racing through it, like they're being typed very rapidly. And they're, excuse me. I'm becoming unable to talk. We're going to have to conclude this quite quickly.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry, but this time of year, my allergies are uncontrollable, and it's very, very difficult to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Just make.
I can certainly finish. We can talk for another 10 minutes or so.
Okay,
And
perfect.
I'm sorry, I hope I haven't embarrassed you.
We have one or two questions from the audience. I have one question too, so I will put a short clip.
Let me finish about the implant if I can.
Yeah, in the letters you see, I think it's important.
Typed material goes through. It goes past too fast to read, but then you get ideas about your work, and they're good. Everything I've written since 2015, when I began to learn to use it, has been using it. Afterlife Revolution, A New World, Jesus, A New Vision, and them, among the best books I've ever written, all more or less on this subject, and all based on the use of the implant. So, any other questions you've got from the audience? It's time to do this because I'm soon going to become unable to talk at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to the audience. Here's one. In two different moments, Mr. Strieber mentions that he saw one figure with a round hat and another one with a hood. What kinds of beings could they be?
Well, they clearly weren't human beings, I'll tell you that for sure. The one with the hat looked almost like a robot. That was one of the first ones I saw. And the ones with the hoods they're quite, when you read the communion letters that are at Rice University, they're mentioned more often actually than the gray people with the big black eyes. And they are workers of some sort, it would be what I think.
Okay, and there is another question that it's my question also. So let me put a short clip before I. We do have the right. What could this mean? Are we some kind of property of them? Are we some kind of pets in a zoo called Planet Earth? This is one of the questions, and the other one, in my final question. Um, in your book, you mentioned that you were asked what can they do to stop you screaming, and at a certain point, you have said, "Let me smell you."
Yes,
Can you explain the reason which led you to that answer and describe the smell and the texture of their
yes,
skin?
sure. The first question uh, is that all I can say is what I saw. In other words, I'm not going to go on down that path of speculation. I can, as I've said before, I can tell you what I saw, what I remember, but I can't even tell you for sure that what I saw is what was there, because
Yes.
I'm telling you about my perceptions, not what was actually out there. It was what my eyes and mouth and nose and everything was, my whole perceptual system was telling me. What if it was telling me something that wasn't right? Uh, and uh, uh, so that's where that is. Now, with regard to the second question, I can you repeat the second question? Actually, I'm
About the odor.
Sure. At a
About
certain point, they asked you, what could they do to stop you
oh, help me
screaming?
stop screaming. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it sounded like a mechanical voice. It sounded like a generated voice, and not like, we can make voices now that sound exactly like human beings. But this didn't. This was not like that. This was more mechanical and a soft sort of feminine quality to it. But you could tell it was a machine talk. And the answer was not a lot. I mean, what could they do to help me stop screaming? Take me home might have worked eventually, but I was terribly upset. I mean, I was going to stop screaming because they, I mean, and with regard to the smell, I did that because I wanted to ground myself. I was involved in what was, no question, the strangest thing that ever happened to me in my life. And I wanted to know, was it real? And so I tried to engage as many senses as I could. That was also the sense of smell. I didn't engage the sense of taste because I didn't have the courage to do that. I didn't know what would happen if I asked that question.
Yeah.
But the smell was a cinnamon-like smell, mild, not strong.
Okay, this was my final
Can
question, Rodrigo and Francisco.
yeah, I think I have a good one. I I think I heard you, Whitley, talk about some military connections. I don't want to say connections, but some military experiences or influences you had in your life. Can you go a bit in relating to that? I'm asking that question because of now what's happening, the involvement of the military with the phenomenon, etc. So, do you can you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Yeah, of course. After I published Communion, my father's brother, my uncle, who was then a retired Air Force intelligence officer, telephoned me and said he wanted me to come have lunch with him and his wife. And so my wife and I went to have lunch with them. And we were living in New York. We flew down to San Antonio to have the lunch because he had said it was important. And we knew nothing. No one in the family knew a thing about what he'd done in the military. All we knew was that he was attached to the Atomic Energy Commission. And he said to me that he had read my book and that he had been involved in the examination of the materials that had come from a crashed flying saucer in Roswell, New Mexico. And I had heard of the story by then, and I'd always heard it was all a lie, and there was crash test dummies and all these other cockamamie stories that the Air Force had come up with.
Yeah.
And he said, and I want to introduce you to my friend General Arthur Exon, who was also there, because he was involved more deeply than I was, and he would like to talk to you. And General Exon spent an hour or so on the phone with me, talking about the materials that they had gotten, and he didn't talk to me about, but he talked to someone else in the family about the bodies that they had gotten, and he described them in great detail, and he said that he was still at that time in 1988 consulting with the scientific group that was working on this project, because so little had been put down on paper. It was so secret that they didn't keep meeting notes, and he would go down to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, which was then, and remind them of what his group had worked on back in the past. So I knew then that there was something to all of this. And not only that, I found out later that many military people and military families are involved in this, that if you get involved in this in the military, and a lot of military people do, in any way whatsoever. I mean, I don't think Mickey, my uncle, was ever abducted or anything, but the fact that he was involved caused the visitors to focus on him and his family, and they ended up following me in my life. And that happens to loads of military families. In fact, my guess is that there are probably more military families involved in this than there are civilian families.
Yeah, maybe because there's a bigger connection with the phenomenon, because they investigate it, they see it, they pilot those planes that see them, and they have contacts, and then maybe that goes
right.
That goes,
and they shoot at them sometimes, and that's
yeah,
a
they shoot
mistake.
them.
Some of these men have been hurt from doing that. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. Yeah.
Francisco, última questão para o Whitley Strieber.
Well, first of all, I want to thank for you, Whitley, being available to us and present your case and your experiences. I want to respect also your conditions, so I would hope that we could invite you later in the year, well, in 2024 for
Yes.
another conversation. I would like, obviously, to know more about your relation with the Rice University, how it became interested in your work, your relation with Jeffrey Kripal, and the work in supernatural, and of course your take also with the participation in the Soul Foundation conference a month ago.
Yes, I can certainly talk about all of those things, and hopefully I won't have this allergy business at that time. It came up very unexpectedly. I really didn't expect it to be this bad.
Yeah,
and
we
I
want to
apologize
respect
to your
that.
audience for struggling the way I have.
We
for sure.
perfectly understand that, and we want to respect that, and we hope to have you in a couple of months when this season of your condition with the allergies may be
well,
softened.
for sure, when we come back together again, I'm not planning to bring the allergies.
Hope to see you again, Mr. Strieber. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience, your effort to be here with us tonight.
It was a pleasure.
Thank
it was a big pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And thank the audience for spending time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate. Muito bem, Rodrigo, Francisco, foi a nossa conversa com Whitley Strieber. Muito havia a dizer.
Havia muito por explorar ainda, gostava de dizer, eu gostaria imenso de saber um pouco mais sobre o interesse que a Rice University desenvolveu para, neste momento, é um depositório, não só do trabalho do Whitley, mas também, por exemplo, da Paula Harris e de outros investigadores. Gostava de saber o que levou o Jeffrey Kripal, que é um dos grandes pensadores da atualidade, em termos de filosofia, da ciência, etc., o que o levou a criar, a escrever este livro Supernatural, que eu aconselho, é absolutamente fantástico. E, obviamente, há um mês atrás, aproximadamente um mês atrás, estava a ocorrer a conferência da Sol Foundation, da Fundação Sol, gerida pelo Gary Nolan. O Whitley esteve lá e, portanto, gostaríamos, obviamente, de saber. O Robert Fleischer, nosso membro da ICER, também lá esteve, mas eu gostava de saber um pouco das várias visões de quem lá passou, saber como tudo correu. Portanto,
sim. Gostava de saber também a opinião aqui no chat, o que acharam desta pequena conversa com Whitley Strieber. Houve muito realmente que ficou por explorar, a história é vasta, e quando pensamos que tudo começa no livro Communion, de facto não é bem assim, porque o livro Communion depois remete-nos para episódios antecedentes em outubro. Mas gostava de saber aqui a opinião das pessoas relativamente ao que foi dito, ao que foi contado, ao que foi partilhado pelo Whitley Strieber. De facto, juntamente com os casos emblemáticos de Travis Walton, Batty e Bernie Hill, este é um dos grandes casos ufológicos.
Principalmente pela riqueza das experiências que ele relata, não é? Que são, de facto, extremamente diversas. Algumas parece que é o país das maravilhas, não é? Quase o feiticeiro de Oz. São de tal maneira estranhas, difíceis de entender, de explicar tudo, e portanto por isso é que ele também se refere que não consegue dar uma explicação. O que é que isto é? Não há uma resposta simples, não é? Pode haver mil e uma origens. Portanto,
lá está.
Esta conversa, no fundo, é uma gota d'água apenas, não é? Portanto, é uma introdução,
é uma conversa que estimula a nossa... Nós não chegamos a conclusão nenhuma, nós especulamos, estimula a nossa especulação. Por exemplo, há aqui um episódio que não tivemos a oportunidade de explorar com o Whitley, mas, por exemplo, uma das pessoas conhecidas do Whitley, que também foi uma contactada, a dada altura também está em pânico com aquilo que está a acontecer, com os seres que estão em volta dela. E eles perguntam-me também telepaticamente porque é que ela tem tanto medo. E estes seres terão respondido, e ela terá respondido, porque vocês são muito feios. E a resposta do ser foi: um dia serás como nós. Isto é extremamente interessante. Isto leva-nos aqui a uma live de 3 horas, como diz o Ricardo, aqui com especulação. Porque escutando este relato do Whitley e falando com outros contactados e mesmo nas conversas que tenho tido aqui com o professor Pedro Barbosa, esta questão do extratemporal começa a ganhar cada vez mais força. Pelo menos é a minha opinião.
O Michael Masters, não é?
Sim.
O Michael Masters.
Não é uma teoria propriamente nova.
Não é nova, não.
Não é nova. Está a ser mais falada por... Não sei, isto anda muito por modas, não é? Anda muito por modas. Mas sim, quer dizer...
O Bryce Zabel fez o primeiro filme dele antes de fazer o Dark Skies, que foi aquela série que passou na televisão, até passou cá em Portugal.
Sim.
O primeiro filme dele foi o Unofficial Denial, qualquer coisa assim, já não me recordo bem do nome, mas pronto, é a primeira produção do Bryce Zabel, fala mesmo sobre isso. Acabei de fazer um spoiler enorme. Estraguei, já sei que estraguei o filme a muita gente.
Estragaste a experiência.
Mas é assim, isto é pesquisa, não é? Nós temos que falar sobre estas coisas, não podemos ser Não podemos estar a omitir.
Se nós considerarmos que vivemos em 3 dimensões e se a quarta for o tempo e se estes seres, de certa forma, conseguirem ter domínio sobre a quarta dimensão, lá estamos nós aqui na especulação, mas é muito interessante. Adoro filosofar sobre isto. O Palhinha escreve aqui: o Gary Nolan reconheceu na capa do livro Communion os seres que o visitaram a ele quando era criança. Este foi um pormenor relatado pelo Whitley, que assim que o livro atingiu as prateleiras das shelves, não é? e as montras, o livro teve uma grande procura porque muita gente reconheceu aquela figura, principalmente pelos olhos. Há algumas dúvidas relativamente às feições, principalmente a boca. Muita gente diz que não parece sorrir. Aquela do Whitley dá a ideia que há ali um pequeno sorriso camuflado. Mas que muita gente reconheceu o livro, reconheceu o ser que estava no livro, e foi isso que levou a uma grande corrida pelo livro. Depois houve um outro pormenor interessante, que o Whitley, na parte de trás do livro, colocou lá a morada dele, para que alguém que tivesse uma experiência parecida pudesse escrever. Só que as cartas chegaram aos milhares e, portanto, tiveram de contratar pessoas para estar para ler a correspondência, e algumas dessas pessoas chegaram a fazer parte de encontros que se teve nessa cabine, nessa cabana na floresta. Uma das questões que eu queria ter perguntado ao Whitley, e vai ter de ficar para 2024, é sobre a venda da cabana, porque ele depois acabou por vender a cabana. E eu fiquei com algumas dúvidas se terá sido por algum tipo de dificuldade financeira ou se por
é muito comum. Nos Estados Unidos eles passam a vida a trocar e a vender, e portanto não é... o Bob Jacobs é a mesma coisa. Portanto, ele tinha uma cabana que sempre gostou imenso quando era pequeno, que cresceu e depois vendeu e depois comprou outra e depois acho que voltou a recuperar a que tinha vendido. Portanto, faz parte daquela cultura também americana. Não são muito apegados às coisas, vão trocando.
Ele, a dada altura, refere no livro, isto não surge no documentário, apesar de ter saído um documentário muito interessante e passou há pouco tempo no Travel Channel, que se chama The Visitors, e quem tiver o box, com sorte, ainda o pode encontrar, porque repetem com alguma frequência. É um documentário de cerca de 2 horas. Não é tão pormenorizado como o livro. O livro vai muito ao detalhe. E algo que está no livro e que não está no documentário é que eu, ao ver o documentário, fiquei na ideia que terá vendido a cabana por algumas dificuldades financeiras. No livro, ele refere que, a dada altura, ele à janela parece que se assustou com algo. O céu parecia ganhar vida, e houve algo ali que o perturbou e o fez optar por vender a cabana. Um pormenor muito interessante é que, passado muitos anos, ele voltou à cabana, e o documentário nisso é excelente porque acompanha o regresso dele à cabana, onde ele fica no mesmo quarto onde tudo aconteceu, e nós não sabemos se isto é pós-produção ou não, mas volta a acontecer um fenómeno estranho com as luzes no exterior, e o Whitley acorda à meio da madrugada, algo perturbado. E, portanto, isto é algo que podem ver no documentário, ou então ler o livro. Eu só encontrei o livro online, fui até à FNAC procurar o Communion, mas só por encomenda, e, portanto, optei pela versão online.
A versão
também
Kindle,
fácil de
encontrar. Mas a versão e-book, não é? E-book.
É a versão e-book, sim.
Mas existe em português ou é...
Meus caros, desculpem-me, vou ter que me ausentar.
Muito bem.
Está bem? Desculpem, deixo-vos.
Obrigado pela participação.
E
também já não posso demorar muito.
Uma ideia também será ter cá a Kathleen Marden, que é a sobrinha da Betty Hill, e que também tem a sua...
Também tenho algumas perguntas para lhe fazer.
Tem muitos detalhes pouco conhecidos, inclusive, não é?
Sim. Depois Pois, e depois tem aquela grande experiência com aquela relação que teve de trabalho com o Stan Friedman.
Stanton
certo?
Friedman, sim. Eu tenho o livro
Escrever
dele
um
assinado
livro,
pelos
exemplo.
dois. Tenho o livro assinado
Sim,
pelos
sim.
dois.
Excelente.
Sim, vale a pena. Portanto, contem para o início de 2024 ter cá a Kathleen Marden também para falar
Muito
um
bem.
pouco da
Boas
experiência.
surpresas.
Sim, senhora.
Entretanto,
Francisco, obrigadíssimo.
Vou
Obrigado.
deixar-vos então. Um grande
Obrigado,
abraço, boas
Francisco. Um
festas aos
abraço.
nossos ouvintes e boas entradas.
E havemos
Vamos
voltar
falar
para fazer
igualmente.
um apanhado de
sim.
2024. Está bem?
Exatamente. Temos
Ok,
que
Francisco.
fazer um apanhado do 2023 antes do final do ano. Sim, já me tinha esquecido
Exatamente.
disso.
Ok.
Tá.
Francisco,
abraço.
obrigadíssimo. Até à próxima.
já.
Obrigado, Francisco. Tchau, Francisco.
Rodrigo, agora nós dois, e sem interferências de áudio. Realmente esta
Sim.
live teve várias interferências. O microfone do Whitley estava com algumas interferências, o do Francisco também, e agora estamos aqui apenas nós, sem interferências. Tu és um apaixonado pelo tema também, conheces o fenómeno até melhor que eu, mas certamente que também passaste parte da tua juventude.
Espera, já tiveste experiências com o fenómeno? Já tiveste algum avistamento?
Em miúdo, sim, mas nunca tive
Pronto.
nada assim muito
Então já me
direto.
passaste à frente. Eu
Sim,
também tive uma experiência e não foi há cerca de 10 anos atrás e foi engraçado porque estava a falar sobre isso com um amigo e surgiu algo estranho, uma pequena luz entre as estrelas a fazer zigue-zagues e nós a falarmos sobre OVNIs. Pronto. São daquelas coisas, deve ser mais ou menos como foi a tua experiência.
a minha experiência foi quando era miúdo e era um disco preto. Tipo, é o clássico, os dois pratos, mas totalmente escuro e durou poucos minutos, mas eu confesso que também nunca fiz muito para procurar. Eu não vou a vigílias, por exemplo, não ando à procura. Gosto de falar sobre o tema, gosto de falar com quem conhece. E nós estamos num país onde, felizmente, temos aqui muita gente capacitada para falar sobre o tema. Pronto, o Paulo Cosmeli foi quem me guiou nos meus primeiros passos. Para mim foi ali um apoio muito importante, mas Paulo Cosmeli, José Garrido, quando estava aqui entre nós também, o Aparício também tem um trabalho sempre constante. Depois temos a Academia Portuguesa, debruçada sobre o fenómeno OVNI de uma forma mais ou menos camuflada, mas também sempre a estudar o fenómeno OVNI. Isto até chegar ao grande Joaquim Fernandes, que no fundo considero que é o pai de tudo isto. Mas tu terás feito mais ou menos um percurso como o meu, penso eu. Nós seremos mais ou menos da mesma geração. Terás crescido, de certa forma, com os relatos do Whitley Strieber. Eu lembro-me, não tive acesso aos livros do Whitley, mas o Communion, por exemplo, a única forma, isto é numa era pré-internet, portanto, a forma que eu tinha de obter informação era comprar revistas espanholas, e havia 2 ou 3, era a Mais penso que ainda existe, a Enigma e a Ano Zero. E, portanto, eram 3 revistas espanholas que eu comprava mensalmente, ou 2 em 2 meses, quando chegavam cá a Portugal, e fui acompanhando os relatos. E o Whitley Strieber era constante, e através de conheci também o Bud Hopkins, que teve um papel muito importante a acompanhar o caso do Whitley Strieber. E, portanto, gostava de saber a tua opinião relativamente a isto que o Whitley nos conta.
Eu, a primeira vez que ouvi falar do Whitley Strieber foi na altura em que vi um livro escrito. Aliás, não foi o livro. Foi o Invaders, que foi uma série, uma minissérie que passou na televisão portuguesa, baseada na obra do Bud Hopkins.
Sim,
daí...
ele tinha 2 livros, um deles foi o Missing Time, que foi um caso de uma contactada amiga do Whitley Strieber, foi aquela inclusive que eu disse, que eu referi há pouco, porque é que tens tanto medo? E ela responde, porque vocês são
exatamente,
feios. E ele responde, um dia serás como nós. Portanto, esse
exatamente.
livro, Missing Time, do Bud Hopkins, é inspirado na história dessa contactada. E depois ele tem um outro que é o Intruders. Portanto, penso que foram
Intruders, era isso, é
os
isso, não é
dois grandes
Invaders, é
livros
Intruders.
do Bud
Exatamente.
Hopkins.
Intruders. E então eu lembro-me de ver isso na televisão, fiquei fascinado fiquei fascinado mesmo pela parte relacionada, pela área toda relacionada com a abdução, porque até aí eu adorava ver fotografias de OVNIs e era basicamente isso. Aí é fascinante, aí olha lá o design e este é tão tosco e aquele é tão futurista e tal, era mais isso. E depois foi a partir daí. Então, poucos anos, isto passou-se, eu devo ter visto isso por volta de 1996, 97, sim, por essa altura. Eu tinha mais ou menos 17 ou 18 anos e pouco tempo depois foi o boom da internet e então aí recordo-me perfeitamente de ver o primeiro vídeo, de ver um vídeo na internet que tinha sido posto, não sei se era no YouTube ou se era ainda não sei se foi no YouTube ou se foi num canal, num site onde já colocavam vídeos com investigadores a falar, etc., com contactados. E um deles era o Whitley Strieber a falar sobre o implante. Esse me causou um impacto enorme. Portanto, foi das primeiras coisas que me fez ter contacto com o trabalho do Whitley.
Algo que eu acho muito interessante é que ele tem um implante precisamente na mesma zona que a Mónica de Medeiros, que também passou aqui pelo canal, diz ter. E o implante para ela serve como um género de transmissor telepático, quase. Daí aquela minha questão ao Whitley Strieber.
Ele acaba por ter um pouco mais ou menos a mesma função, porque ele vê a informação a passar-lhe diante dos olhos, mas acaba por ter uma
essa é uma
variação.
informação que eu desconhecia. Essa foi uma revelação aqui em primeira mão para mim. Há um excerto do documentário em que ele, acho que é deste documentário do Travel, que ele encosta um género de walkie-talkie ao ouvido e faz interferência. À medida que se vai aproximando do implante, faz interferência. Mas esta questão de ver um género de escrita a surgir à frente é muito interessante. Quase que me remete para o episódio de Rendlesham Forest, com aquela história de começar a ver traços e zeros.
Ver o código binário, não é?
O binário, mas o grande
Jim
problema disso é que esta questão do binário apenas surge 20 anos depois do incidente ter
30.
acontecido. Ou 30, portanto,
Foi
30
30.
anos.
30 anos, foi no
aos 30
aniversário
anos.
dos 30 anos.
Portanto, para mim foi introduzido lá. E pronto, lá está, é uma forma de manter o caso vivo e atual e para se ir falando sobre ele e alguém vai sempre lucrando com isso, certamente. No caso do Whitley, achei muito curioso. Achei interessante o implante ser na mesma zona do da Mónica de Medeiros. Interessante o implante mover-se de sítio. Não sei se ele teve algum contacto com Roger Lear, que normalmente era ele, foi responsável pela extração de vários implantes. Uma vez mais, sabemos que interfere com campos eletromagnéticos, emite um sinal de rádio. Pronto, e aqui está a grande revelação, ele vê palavras a surgir. Isso é muito curioso e que isso inspira-o para os livros que escreveu posteriormente, o que também é algo que não estava à espera de escutar aqui. Portanto, espero que no chat tenham gostado. Não sei se mais alguém escreveu aqui alguma coisa. Gostávamos de saber a vossa opinião.
Obrigado, César, por colocar aqui o livro.
Sim, aqui o link do Communion para quem quiser. Infelizmente não está em português, mas é muito pormenorizado este livro. Muito, ele vai ao detalhe em tudo. E pronto, e foi mais um grande nome da ufologia a passar aqui pelo Exo Realidades. A Kathleen Martin, eventualmente, para inícios de 2024, que é muito interessante. Interessante, sobretudo, Isto foi algo que acho que já falei aqui com o professor Pedro Barbosa. Ela é familiar da Betty Hill e foi encontrado um fio de cabelo no vestido que a Betty Hill usou a quando da experiência que teve. E esse fio de cabelo foi analisado e não correspondia. Deixa-me cá tentar responder a isto. O fio de cabelo foi analisado e pertencia a uma tribo da China já extinta. Há muitos anos.
Pois,
Um povo nómada. E achei muito curioso ela ter revelado isso. Nunca tinha lido sobre isso, nem nenhuma da literatura que consultei sobre o tema. E ela revelou isso num podcast chamado New Frontier Network, onde estava o Richard Dolan. E claro que isso também aguçou muito o interesse do Richard Dolan. E, portanto, tê-la aqui para nos contar melhor essa história vai ser uma mais-valia também.
Sim.
A Tânia
É interessante.
Aqui. Sim.
É interessante porque na China existem as pedras ou as rochas dropa, que são... Estou aqui a ler no Wikipedia e está a dizer que tem cerca de 12... Que se faz a alegação de que tem 12 mil anos, cerca de 12 mil anos, mais ou menos, mas fala logo aqui em pseudo-arqueologia, mas pronto.
Pois.
Mas também é, pronto, alguma coisa que fuja ali um bocadinho alguma coisa que fuja um pouco ali daquilo que os cientistas mainstream não concordem, é logo pseudo-arqueologia, portanto também não temos que levar isso muito a sério. Mas é muito interessante esta história das Drop Stones, que também são associadas a alguns cientistas que as associam a civilizações passadas, neste caso na zona da China. Portanto, isso agora despertou-me aqui.
Conhecido, é interessante. Acho que é um bom tópico para explorarmos com ela. O Palhinha diz que há muita coisa para cobrir da atualidade e que espera mais lives para breve. Nós vamos ter de fazer um apanhado do que foi 2023, mas 2023 tem sido uma autêntica montanha-russa, Rodrigo.
Pois.
O que é que te marcou mais aqui deste ano ufológico? A aparição em cena de David Grush, por exemplo.
Basicamente.
As revelações de Ross Coulthard, em que diz que sabe, por fonte segura, que foi encontrada uma nave, mas de tamanho tão grande, que foi impossível movê-la e teve de construir um edifício por cima dela. Portanto, 2023 está repleto de informações, mas com poucas provas.
Pois, nada concreto, lá está. Não
Exatamente.
Temos nada na mão, nem mesmo fotografias na mão que possamos ter uma ideia. Mas pronto, nós estamos a depositar aqui a nossa esperança no futuro em que possamos ter mais provas concretas dessas coisas todas que se vão dizendo. Eu não tenho problemas em esperar por isso. Mas para mim mesmo, o despoltar disto tudo, de todas estas coisas que têm estado a ser faladas agora, foi mesmo a questão do David Grush, pronto, ter vindo fazer o que veio fazer no Congresso e com aquela primeira entrevista que fez, e agora vai fazendo mais algumas entrevistas. E
depois teve também o Skiff, não é? À porta fechada.
Pois, tudo isso, todas essas coisas que ele tem estado mais ou menos, isto é, tentado a abrir a porta para poder aparecer mais gente a dizer mais coisas sobre o assunto, a poder ser explorado pelo Congresso americano.
Sim,
e a poder... Sim.
Aliás, ia-te dizer que surgiu mais um ex-oficial. Estou aqui a ver o antigo Twitter, o X, o Ronnie Vernet, tem já um pequeno excerto de uma entrevista do Russ Coulthard com outro ex-oficial que
com
agora...
o Tim Gallaudet.
Sim, exatamente.
Mas já existem, quem tiver interesse em ver entrevistas com essa pessoa já pode vê-las no Project Unity. O Project Unity já tem aliás, o Project Unity tem entrevistas com gente muito interessante, com o Oak Shannon, que tem a ver com toda aquela fase do grupo de trabalho nos anos 90, no princípio dos anos 90, que foi o grupo de trabalho com o Eric Davis, com essa gente toda. Portanto, ele tem uma entrevista com o Oak Shannon a confirmar tudo relativamente ao memo Wilson, aquele memorando, aquela entrevista que o Eric Davis terá feito ao almirante Thomas Wilson. Portanto, sim, tem uma entrevista com este Tim Gallaudet, tem uma entrevista com, acho que é o Bobby Inham. Já ouviste falar do Bobby Inham?
Penso que não.
Seria, então é assim, é um investigador que é só me lembro do último nome, Ashler, Bob Ashler, Bob, são todos Bobs. O Bob Ashler conseguiu fazer uma entrevista com uma alta patente, eu não me recordo exatamente qual era o cargo que essa pessoa tinha, e esse senhor é o Bobby Inman. E então esse senhor, durante a entrevista, falava sobre os tais crash retrievals, a recolha de objetos. Sim. E ele dizia que sim, que é tudo verdade, tal, pronto. Entretanto, já há outra entrevista recente com ele a falar sobre isso. Uma entrevista telefónica. Mas, entretanto, eu julgo que exista também no canal Project Unity uma entrevista com esse senhor, mas a pôr a coisa um pouco de lado. Estão algumas entrevistas interessantes lá nesse canal do YouTube, Project Unity. Muito interessantes, com esta gente assim de alta patente que tem ido lá a falar. Coisas muito interessantes. E um deles é esse tema. Acho que ele deu 2 ou 3 entrevistas com o Project Unity já. E esta com o Ross Coulthard vai ser... de certeza que também vai ser interessantíssima. Porque ele, neste momento, a fase em que o Gallaudet está é fazer a ligação de uma série de coisas que têm estado a acontecer agora. Portanto, ele vai confirmar determinadas coisas, vai ter um papel importante nesse aspecto.
Muito bem, vamos aguardar por 2024 e as novidades que se afiguram. Dar aqui um agradecimento aos nossos membros, membro ouro Miguel Costa, membro ouro Margarida Gaspar, membro prata Ana Candeias. São pequenos contributos, mas que vão ajudando para que nós um dia possamos ter aqui a versão premium do StreamYard. Portanto, obrigado a todos. Obrigado também.
Obrigado, Miguel, Margarida, Ana.
Muito bem, foi então mais uma entrevista com um grande nome da ufologia. Já foram vários os que passaram por cá. Agradeço o interesse de todos. Rodrigo, obrigado pela tua presença depois do interregno que fizeste. É ótimo ter-te de volta aqui na equipa.
É um prazer e agradeço imenso esta oportunidade de falar com o Whitley Strieber, que não é todos os dias temos essa oportunidade, não é?
Sim. Tendo em conta que fez parte, que alimentou de certa forma o nosso interesse pelo tema e foi um dos responsáveis por hoje estarmos aqui a falar sobre o tema, acho que foi muito gratificante.
Sem dúvida.
Portanto, deixa-me cá ver aqui mais algum comentário que tenha antes de irmos embora. E Miguel Costa, boas festas a todos. Boas festas, Miguel.
Boas festas a todos.
Espero que ainda nos encontremos para fazer a tal análise de 2023 com o Francisco.
Sim, temos que fazê-la.
Temos de fazê-la porque foi um ano marcado por muitas revelações e, portanto, há que fazer um apanhado. Muitas revelações, muitos avanços, mas também alguns recuos de certas fações que vão ganhando alguma força. Portanto, querem um disclosure muito controlado, demasiado controlado até. Mas, de facto o paradigma mudou e...
Tendo em conta que antes de 2017 nem era ridículo falar sobre o assunto.
Era impensável.
Era impensável.
Ora, referente à tribo oriental, no livro Visão Remota de Angela Smith, Voices from the Cosmos, é referido uma tribo não humana tipo oriental que habita o nosso planeta. olha que engraçado como é que as coisas se podem cruzar, não é? E podemos encontrar aqui uma ligação entre tudo isto com o relato da Kathleen Martin. Portanto, olha,
Sem dúvida.
aqui está um tópico interessante para a conversa com a Kathleen Martin, mas realmente aquilo era um fio de cabelo de uma tribo oriental. Nada revela que fosse não humana, mas era de uma tribo já há muito extinta. Mas vamos aguardar por mais revelações. Muito bem, meus amigos, vamos embora. Obrigado a todos. Rodrigo, obrigado também. E cá estaremos brevemente com mais uma live. Até breve.